You're very welcome to episode 49 of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, we're going all the way down to Waterford in Ireland with Enda O'Doherty. Enda, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rian. Good morning. How are you?
I'm very good. Busy morning, but good. So for those who don't know you, author, international motivational keynote speaker, you've run nine marathons in 8 days. But typical fashion of this podcast is we go right back to chapter one and work our way from there. So out of curiosity, I've done some research and I know that you live in Waterford, but are you from Kildare?
So I was born in Westmeath, and my parents lived in a place called Millmount, right beside Joe Dolan and the Swarbricks, Mullingars, Glitterati. And they moved from there my dad bought a small shop in West Wicklow. You know, the kind of shop, Rian, where if you wanted something, you had to point because it was behind the counter.
Yeah.
And I remember my first visit there as a 5-year-old, and there was a huge storeroom of sweets, and we walked through the next storeroom. It was piled to the ceiling with coffins, because that's what you did in rural Ireland. You sold everything: wellies, coffins, flowers. And my dad was, he's an amazing man still. He's 84, but he was an innovative businessman. He had this new idea, this thing that he thought was going to catch on in Ireland, called a supermarket. Now, the concept was that you got all of the products together and you let the customers touch them. So he bought this small little country shop and turned it into, a fine big supermarket and petrol station. So West Wicklow was where I grew up. But I suppose West Wicklow is Wicklow people will hate me for saying it, but Kildare really. So I went to school in Newbridge, and I went to primary school in now a hotel, Killashee in Nace, and would have been in university in Maynooth. So it's I was going to say a lot of travels, but not really, not an Irish scale.
No, if you know Ireland, it's not too much, but you can work it to sound exotic to an international audience. Talk to me. You're growing up in all those different places. You got any favorite standout memories, or what was your childhood like?
My childhood was I suppose it was quite black and white. I would have had a difficult childhood. I suppose I would have been bullied a little bit, probably because my parents were, economically, they were very successful. And sometimes there's a price to be paid for that. You were the son of the rich kid. That was tough at times. But I would say in the main, it was idyllic. I had world-class education. I had the happiest, kindest parents in the world. I had great siblings. We did things in the 80s that people weren't doing in Ireland because of recession. So, we were traveling all over Europe and going on holidays, and it was a pretty good childhood, I suppose. In terms of what I've ended up doing in life, and I suppose the person I am, I grew up where work ethic was number one. You got up as early as you could get out of that bed, and you worked until you dropped. And while my dad set up this supermarket, it's mad to think now, but I saw a documentary there the other night on reeling in the years. Like my full childhood and teenage years, particularly during the summers, would be Wednesday we'd drive to Smithfield Market, because they sold exotic goods such as pineapples and bananas, and we would then transport these back down to Wicklow to sell to the natives who hadn't seen pineapples and bananas, literally. And it's funny now, you walk into any supermarket, you take it as a given, there's a supply chain, and there's all of these goods are available the whole time. But it was hard work. My Saturdays were lifting cylinders of gas, weighing bags of potatoes, and carrying bags of coal. And I think it gave me a couple of things. It gave me huge resilience. It gave me huge determination, and it gave me a realization that you have a wide spectrum of guests here, but I would see common threads through the successful ones, and that's in the world we live in. You want coffee, add water, it's instant success. You want a pizza, click dial. You want a friend, add. You want to get rid of a friend, delete. But in the teams and businesses that I'm lucky enough to inspire and work with, it doesn't work like that. It's relentless, persistent, consistent effort. It's relentless overcoming failures and hard work that gets you there. Inspiration as well as perspiration. So I definitely would have got that.
I'm sure you got a lot of that from your father as well, but you've touched on your parents with the supermarket. Where did they get that? I guess, were they entrepreneurial by nature? How did that come about? Because you said it was a different time back in Ireland back then, and pineapple and bananas being exotic.
Pizza.
How did they come to own a supermarket?
I think, well, my mom was a primary school teacher and very gifted musician. My dad had worked in a small hardware store, and I think he realized, I can be a cog in the machine here, or I can make my own cogs on my own machine, and off he went. I think my grandfather was also quite an innovative man, an unusual man. Like in the 1920s, there's a photograph just behind me here of him. He was a radio officer, and he traveled the world multiple times, sending Morse code back, and he just wanted to do something different. I think it's probably rushed off on me too, and that, so many people meet me and they go, wow, what's it like to be an author? God, imagine, like, yesterday I spoke to, I don't know, a couple of thousand people on a webinar, and they go, God, that must be so exciting. And sometimes I sort of forget, yes, it is, it's a bloody great job, and it's a fantastic privilege, and it's so exciting, and maybe, we find it, we can fight the genes, Rian, but we are a product of what we grow up in and what's around us to an extent.
Well, here's what I know about you so far. You are a mad Leinster rugby fan. I believe you own a dog or two dogs. You've been on holidays to places like Lanzarote. You've seen Ed Sheeran in Crow Park. But what's one thing you're into or curious about that not a lot of people know about you?
I'm curious about your level of stalking, how legal it is. That's pretty in depth. That's pretty good. Yeah, I do love Ed Sheeran. I do love rugby. I suppose something that people don't know about me. I, as a motivational speaker, sometimes I'm not motivated. I'm human. I spoke yesterday I was doing a call yesterday with a fantastic, huge worldwide company, Dassault Systems, and I was speaking to to the organizer. We were online about 20 minutes on the webinar, and she said, "Oh my God, you must be so confident." And I said, "Honestly, I'm wearing a navy suit because the cold sweat is running down my back. I'm terrified." And she was, "What? How many have you done this year?" I said, "I don't know. I've lost track." And she said, "You're still afraid?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm human." In the same way, people think motivational speakers, I'm going to get out of bed in the morning, high five my wife, do 1,000 push-ups and run to the gym, and eat cranberry juice for the day. I think what people miss sometimes is that we are human. Sure. I mean, I have, a pretty fantastic backstory, and it's a story that inspires people. And sure, I've thankfully been gifted talents to explain to people how they can maximize their potential in business and sport and in life. But my dark secret is I'm just human.
I like that. Authentic. Well, tell me this then, as we kind of get into your story and unpack all that, you haven't always been a motivational speaker. And I say this because sometimes we touched on this, an audience of 6,000, we were talking before we went live. Sometimes if you're part of the 6,000, you're looking at one individual on stage, and it can be difficult to relate to that individual because they're in a completely different situation than you are. So you weren't always a motivational speaker, and I say that, follow that with a question of what was the life of Enda before you got into this keynote motivational speaking?
Yeah, well, I suppose back to 1986 when I did my Leaving Cert. The country was in massive recession, and both my parents insisted that I get a nice, sensible degree. So I went and did an arts degree, and to be honest, I really just chased women and drank for 4 years. That's what I did in college, and thankfully I chased and caught the right one because we're together 30 years. But I suppose I went teaching. I had a degree in modern Irish literature through Irish. I get bored easily, so I did Greek and Roman civilization, sociology, and geography. And I did this degree, and sure, my mother said, "You'll have to do teaching because you can't do anything else with that." And I went into a class, and I suppose one of those lucky things that has happened to me repeatedly in life is 5 minutes into my first classroom, I went, "Oh my God, I love this. This was just incredible." And, I, from the first day to, right up to the present, like when I'm in front of people, I'm a teacher, I'm explaining things.
Yeah.
I like to be, to think of, that teacher in school, Rian, that inspired you, or you were a little bit in awe of, a little bit afraid of, a little bit you laughed at, but you still, you had a rapport with, I suppose. And I sometimes, when I look at my job now, when I look at what I do now, I would say to my wife, like, God, I wish I'd done this years ago. And she said, "You couldn't have." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You had to learn the trade." Like I stood in front of classrooms and spoke for 5 hours a day for 30 years. Sometimes people say to me, "God, you're so smooth on stage, or you're so measured, or you're so calm," and I'm going, well, I've been practicing a while. People miss
You've
the
done your
obvious.
10,000 hours.
Yeah, but back to what we were saying earlier about being normal. So that actually, the conference you were talking about, Blackbaud in Baltimore, um, you know, it's a good reflection, maybe, to share with people a little insight into my life as a speaker. So I'm backstage in the auditorium, massive, huge backstage. I mean, the backstage is the size of the Point Theatre. And I see this other speaker, and I walk over and introduce myself. And this guy instantly gives me the handoff. He said, and he had his notes. He was like really stressed reading his notes. And he said, "I'm sorry, man. I'm up next." And I was like, "Oh God, sorry. It's an Irish thing. We talk to everyone, anyone, any point, any opportunity. But I was remember looking at him, and instantly I did that thing we do, self doubt. I was like, God, this is what real pro speakers must do. God, I should get out my notes. And I watched this guy walk way to the back of backstage reading his notes, and I was like, oh my God, how amateur am I? And the next thing I heard, please welcome to stage John Calhoun, or wherever his name was. And it was him, but he had taken out his earpiece, and he was about 2 minutes walk from the backstage. So somebody waved at him and he started running. He put the mic in, his mic went live, and you could hear the entire auditorium. You could hear as he ran up the stage going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Right. But for me, like that day, so my wife was there, and my son actually came to the conference. They flew us out. It was a big deal. But like simple things I would have done on the morning is I walked into the auditorium and I just sat down beside a total stranger and started chatting. So I met these three absolutely beautiful young ladies from Hawaii, and they were at the conference. And I said, are you looking forward? And they said, yeah, there's an Irish guy this morning. He carries washing machines up Kilimanjaro. And I said, no way. And then we chat for a second. I said, you know what? It's me. And she goes, oh my God, what are you doing out here? And I said, I just wanted to meet some of the people that I'm going to speak to. So I went around the left-hand side of the auditorium. I went to the center of the auditorium, and I went to the extreme right. And I had three people that I knew their first names and had spoken to. So I went backstage, and they did, the lights, cameras, action. I came up on the stage, but while there was 6,000 in the theater, I spoke to three people. And, most people, I coach CEOs, and, people who have to present in the media or in public. And people are like, oh my God, I couldn't speak to 6,000. I said, neither could I, but I could speak to three. And I actually knew their names before I even started. So I literally went left, right, center, left, to somebody who wouldn't be familiar. They'd say, my God, you were so relaxed and you really worked the whole room. But it was as simple as talking to three people that I had already met.
That's smart. I like that tactic. I do. I've heard other people. One tactic I heard was just picture people naked, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that in the
No, well,
audience.
you picture the wrong person naked. It could be very awkward altogether. But at another conference I spoke at, very often my role as a motivational speaker. So I speak about resilience. I speak about performance. I speak about, inspiring people to get the best from themselves, because it really doesn't matter whether you're, playing rugby, whether you're selling jelly beans, whether you're trading Bitcoin, whatever your enterprise is. The characteristics and qualities of winners, the characteristics of what makes people successful is universal across the board. Now, I'm very privileged to see that, because I can see that from, I recently did some work with Leinster Rugby, right up to, say, Dassault Systems yesterday, or I went to London and worked with the world sales team for TripAdvisor. And I would tell you, all of those, you couldn't get more diverse, but they all have key characteristics and traits. But I would tell you too, I was backstage, Rian, and there was a meet and greet at this big conference I had spoken at in America. And this lady came over to me. She said, oh my God, she said, I love your accent. And I said, thank you. I said, I didn't have one on the plane this morning. And she started laughing. And I said, no, honestly, everyone on the plane sounded like me. It's only when I got off the plane I had an accent. And she said, are there many Muslims like you in Ireland? And I was completely frozen. But the
Yeah.
wonderful thing about Irish people were, like we were just saying off air there, we're refreshingly honest and blunt. So I just said to her, I haven't a clue what you're talking. I thought, is it the beard? Maybe that was it. And she said, I saw you praying. So what she had seen, I didn't know, she was part of the crew that was in the back room, and she had seen me backstage. And what I often do before I go on stage, and if any of your viewers, anyone who follows you, wants to use this, it's an amazing, powerful technique for speaking. So what I will do is, the way when you just about to speak, you think, oh my God, I won't know what to say, or they won't like me, or they won't buy this product, or I'm going to stutter, or my God, I'm sweating, or you start thinking negatives. So
Yeah.
rather than fight the negatives, what I get people to do is, in your right hand, imagine the negative, put another negative on top of that, and keep going until you've come up with every positive negative, like right down to satellite crashes on the building, meteors, nuclear, like the most ridiculous things. Because when you get the list high enough, what happens is, even no matter how nervous you are, there's a bit of your logic kicks in, and you go, a meteorite isn't going to hit the building. That's stupid, and it's a calming effect. But equally, what I do is in my left hand, I imagine all the good things that could happen. So I could get a radio gig, I could get a movie, I could get another book deal, I could, get some more engagements as a speaker, I could meet someone interesting, I could learn something. I stack up all the positives. And generally, just before I go on stage, I close one hand with the positives. I squeeze my hand and I say, that's what I'm going to get today. And I walk out on stage. And if you have a look at any TV stuff or anything I've done, you'll nearly always see one of my hands closed at the start because I'm literally grabbing the good stuff. That's what I want to happen. But back to this poor lady, what she saw from a distance with me, my hands open going, and she assumed that I was praying. And I said, no, I'm not religious at all. I said, it's a technique I use as a speaker to get the best from myself. But
Nice.
that's the fun of it. I suppose that's what I've been missing with like I have Zoom coming out of my ears. I've put in my
Yeah.
studio here at home. I have lights and camera and sound, a virtual set. But I'm missing the crack, missing watching people squirm on the seat when you ask a really powerful question, or people, crying because they're laughing so much. I miss that side of it.
Me too. You're a source of inspiration for many. Who do you look up to?
I suppose the last 2 years was tough. I really I still do admire and look up to my mother. My book is just over my shoulder there. Oh, wrong shoulder.
Other
I'm
side. There
crying.
you go.
Yeah, and so I wrote a chapter in the book, and she passed away 3 years ago. Sorry, yesterday. She had breast cancer, and I didn't realize what I was living with, but I was living with inspiration. Like, she was the most amazing, powerful woman, permanently happy, permanently up early, bursting with energy, bursting with kindness, super intelligent, very musical. I didn't realize what I was around. Like, her best friend died from cancer. And she died in Nace Regional Hospital, and she really didn't have hospice care, or she was in a bed beside someone who was having their appendix out, and her family had to say goodbye. And my mother's response to that was, in the 80s, to raise £4 or £5 million,
Wow.
and convert the Jockey Hospital in Kildare into Kildare's first hospice. And I suppose, you say, who would I look up to? I would definitely look up to her. An amazing, amazing, inspirational woman. There was a
Well,
journalist asked me, Rian, he asked me once, what was your greatest achievement? Was it 9 marathons in 8 days with a washing machine? Was it climbing Kilimanjaro? Was it your book? Was it, like, as mad as it sounds, we have someone interested in movie rights for the book. And they said to me, what's your greatest achievement? And, sometimes in life, the right answer just comes out. There's no thought
yeah.
process. And I said to them that, my greatest achievement by far is to surround myself with great people. I have nobody in my life that's dead weight. I have anyone that I'm friends with are intelligent, caring, competent, encouraging, inspirational, mad, funny. But, I constantly stick with those people,
Mm.
and it rubs off. Have you ever had someone in a work scenario sit down and they go, it's very wet today. That
Yeah.
coffee's very watery. The mortgage is due next, and 30 seconds into it, you can actually feel your life force leaving you. So my greatest achievement, yeah, surrounding myself with great people. And the person I would admire, I'm going to give two corny answers. I don't care if they're corny because it's the truth, but the second one would be my wife. Like, what an amazing woman. I'm not as stupid as I look, Rian. I met her on Monday. I was 19, and on the Wednesday afternoon, I asked her to marry me, because I knew exactly what she was. She's physically, she's a beautiful lady, but she's the kindest, most caring person you'd ever meet. Inspirational woman to be around.
Where did you meet?
We met in college. She was on her coffee break, and I was dodging lectures as usual. But it's funny. Sometimes in Ireland, we and around the world, we tend to focus on the heroes, and we tend to, there has to be an exceptional person, female, to be a heroine. But when I was carrying this washing machine, and like, it got loads of attention, it's helped me greatly as a speaker, and it's made a lot of difference to saving lives and opening conversations about suicide in Ireland. But on one of our walks, my wife, nearly every walk we finished near a particular hotel where she wants to go to the toilet. And I said to her one day, I said, look, this toilet thing is just ridiculous. Can we just walk someday without going to the toilet? And I said, look, maybe you should get this checked out. So on a Monday morning, she went to the GP. Tuesday, she was at the gynae, and Wednesday, she discovered that she had a 14-pound tumor on her womb. Now, 14 pounds
Well,
is it's a decent sized turkey. It's a big
yeah.
chunk. It was benign, thank God. But on the Thursday morning, she had a full hysterectomy. And if anyone's had someone they love had a hysterectomy, it's a huge operation psychologically and physically. There's a lot of stitches. But she went to see the consultant, and he said, "Look, you have to give up the gym. You have to really mind yourself. Give this time to heal." And she was a bit disappointed because like physical activity is something we're into, And she said to him, "Is there anything I can do?" And he said, "You can walk." So 4.5 months later, she walked beside her husband as he carried a washing machine from Belfast to Waterford. She walked 30 miles every day, and
Well.
she's not on the cover of the book. It's my baldy head, but I like that quiet strength that she has. And when we went to Africa, she was the first to the summit on Kilimanjaro. But you'll never see her waving a flag. She's that quiet, powerful, supportive person.
Well, shout out to your mother and your wife. You've touched on your mother with the hospice
Mm.
center raising money, and you've also touched on the washing machine. The reason why I say this is because you yourself wanted to build a mental health facility in Waterford, which is where you're based at the moment, and you needed upwards of 300,000 euro, which gave you the idea to climb Kilimanjaro with a washing machine in your back to get media attention. For those who are listening, that's the highest freestanding mountain in the world.
Yeah,
Why?
yeah. We're bad with numbers. If you can look out the window can you see outside from where you are, Ian? You can.
Yeah,
Can you see the clouds?
I can. Yeah.
Right, we were 3 days walk above that cloud. If you can get your head around that, 3 days walk above that, 8 days going uphill. I suppose, look, the washing machine thing was, I was very grateful. I went through a very dark time where I was suicidal. I went through a very dark time with depression and anxiety. And when I got free of those, when I mastered it, I was intent on giving back. And, regrettably, I mentor people who are involved in fundraising and different charities. It's very, very hard to raise money. And one thing you do need is a hook for media. You need something people can latch onto. So, the washing machine was a really simple, powerful thing, an image, but also a powerful mental health message. It was, you know, um, in Ireland this week, we lose about 8 to 10 people to suicide. And those people will tragically have lost their lives because they were carrying a hidden load that nobody knew about. Nobody knew they were under pressure. The first thing you know is when you get that tragic phone call or that awful, message from someone that something terrible has happened. So my message with the washing machine was don't carry something stupid if you're around, particularly if you're a man. I would find huge demand from businesses and corporates to speak about mental health because it's really crucial that people know that your mental health it's all you have, your physical health and your mental health. And businesses realize now that if someone in their key worker or someone a part of their team is suffering, that has a massive knock-on effect on everyone around them, and that they genuinely need to care for people. So our message was share the load, ask for help. And I suppose there was a second part of the message, and the second part of the message was, sometimes in life, the guy who's smiling, the guy who seems to be your most successful employee is the guy that's struggling most, and that's why, the title of the book, I don't know, can you make the picture out behind me? So,
Yeah.
when people asked me at my worst, when I was drinking 4 bottles of whiskey a week and people said, how are you getting on? And I said, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I'm great. How are you? And the truth was I was days or weeks away from taking my own life, So I suppose part B of the washing machine was to remind people. But Rian, it's a great bloody conversation opener. Like if you and I go for a walk someday and I put the washing machine on my back, you want to see the smiles, the laughter, like the shock. People are like, what the hell is he doing? And it's a great conversation opener. People will say, why are you carrying that? And you say, look, share the load, ask for help. And they go, God, that's a powerful, simple message,
Yeah.
and it worked, it really got, I mean, I remember being in work one day and getting a request for an interview from the Dubai Times. And, somebody else sent me a link to a conversation. There was a German mountain climbers forum, and they were having a discussion about whether it was myth or legend that an Irish fellow went up Kilimanjaro with a washing machine. And someone sent me this conversation, or I got somebody sent me something from the Tokyo Times or Tokyo something.
Wow.
But here was this Irish fella, that had gone viral, the story, and it's It's been wonderful. Do you know,
Yeah.
it's been absolutely shocking what it has happened in terms of the conversation with mental health, and in terms of, you know, its impact on me personally and professionally, you know. And like so much of it, honestly, Rian, like it's like, do you know, we were coming down off Kilimanjaro, and my wife says to me, "How tired are you?" And I said, "I'm really tired. You know, I lost my toenails, you know, my fat pads. I was having hallucinations. I was really, really ill. You know."
Yeah.
And she said, "How bad are you?" And I said, "I'm seeing stuff." And she said, "What are you seeing?" And there was a couple in front of us, you know, a little bit down the trek in the middle of the jungle. I said, "I said I can see Indiana Jones." And she laughed, and I laughed. And we got down to the car park, and you know, all the Irish crew were there, and Harrison Ford and his wife had been walking in front of me the whole way down the mountain.
Huh.
Do you know, like, I mean, do you know, like I tell people that, they go, "Oh, he's back on the whiskey again." You know, he
Yeah.
made that up. But actually, somebody I was talking to the other day on a podcast said to me, "Yeah, nice story, but yeah, I'm not sure." So I actually sent him. I sent him a Harrison Ford photograph. I got this reply saying,
Brilliant.
"Geez, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you."
Yeah, that was a great response from you. Look, you've touched on the whole mental health side of things, and that you were at your peak drinking 4 bottles of whiskey a week. You're now sober 13 years. You talked about a story about how you moved the shed in your backyard and you found bottles that you used to drink behind the shed.
Yeah,
Um, I was chatting to a Scottish guy the other day for the podcast as well, Rory Fairbairns. He owns a company called One Year No Beer, and you can kind of guess what that is by the title. But he had a moment in his life where actually his wife, she's Swedish, left with his daughter, and she went back to Sweden because he was drinking so much. You know, the moment that it hit him was he was on a train home, and he stuck his head out the train and recorded a video, and he was pissed drunk, and his wife, that was kind of the it moment that it clicked and she left. But he then kind of had a moment in his life where he came to a fork and he had to choose which road he wanted to go down, the either the road of like sorting his shit out for himself but also for his family, or go on the left hand side of, he was an oil broker making good money. He enjoyed the pub. He could have stayed on that route and come up with excuses. It sounds like you had a similar decision, you know, 13 years ago. What was it that was the penny, the moment the penny dropped for you?
do you know? I think most days of the week, including this week, you know, pennies are still dropping. Much of it's a blur. Much of it is embarrassing. Much of it is sad and tragic. And I'd love to tell you, you know, when I tell people I'm an alcoholic, Green, sometimes people think you know, you're going to live under a bridge in a cardboard box, and you know, have a dog called Ted, and you know, eat kebabs out of the bin. And only one of those is true. The kebabs, obviously, I love my
Yeah, yeah,
kebabs.
yeah,
Still love my kebabs, but I didn't have that rock bottom. And I suppose this is the thing about addiction is, and mental health is, you know, there isn't one, you know, description, or there isn't one type, you know. Literally, I played a tennis match very late one night under lights. I came home and I had myself a large brandy and milk, because I thought, you know, Brendan Bean used to drink it, and I thought, if it's good enough for Brendan Bean, it's good enough for me. And if anyone who is drinking, I recommend you try it at some stage. It's very, very delicious. But I woke up the next morning and I'd had an atrocious night's sleep between the adrenaline and the brandy. And I said to my wife, I said, "That's it, I'm done." And she used that tone of voice, you know, that only people in relationships can hear. She said, "That's great, love." And what she really meant was, "Not in a million years." And I suppose it's been a theme through my life. You know, when someone says to me, you know, "You can't do something," it's an instant switch for me. It's a flick, the switch is on and it's game on, and watch me, you know. But you know, the funny thing is, you know, when I was working, I did a gig with Microsoft, brilliant gig with their interns in Africa, Middle East, the week before last. And we were talking about weaknesses, you know, and I said it's really important. I see a lot of people eliminate weaknesses from their life, or try to hide them, or are ashamed of them. And I said, you know, for me, a really powerful tactic is to
yeah,
identify your weaknesses, and it can be your strength. So clearly, I'm someone who is obsessed with alcohol, but that ability to focus and become obsessed is now my superpower. Like, it's absolutely completely normal for me to be out of bed at 5 o'clock, you know, have breakfast at 6, do a podcast with you. You know, I'm going live with a company in the next hour or so. I have a book coming out. Well, I'm contributing to a book for Christmas. I'm hoping to have a book next year. Most people hear my morning and they're exhausted, and it's
yeah,
completely normal for me. Like, I have a podcast coming out. Actually, there you go. There's a world exclusive for you. The first person to hear. So I have a podcast coming out in the next couple of weeks called the Mighty Mini Podcast, and I'm working. I got a fantastic. I'll send it over to you, but and
Yeah,
hopefully
do.
you can share. But I got a fantastic video promoting the podcast made by an amazing guy in Bangladesh that I met online. The power of modern technologies, But like I'm obsessed with the podcast at the moment, right down to the pitch of the music, to the titles, to sponsors, blah blah blah. But I'm completely happy with it, And it's like I say, it's a superpower.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with the podcast. It might become your new addiction. I've started to get into it, and I'm releasing a new podcast every single day, so it takes
Oh
up
my
time,
gosh.
but I
Well, I tell you
enjoy
something
it.
back to what we said at the start about, having a great work ethic, like a prerequisite for success, whether I'm working with a team, a business, an individual is like I tell people straight off upfront, if you're not going to absolutely bury yourself in this and work really huge amounts of effort, you're not going to see success. But I think sometimes too, people plan goals or plan businesses or plan adventures and they don't really know what they're getting into until you're in it. It
Yeah.
sounds lovely, like I have a podcast. People trot it out now like I have a pair of socks. I
Yeah.
have a podcast, but oh my god, when I had to start at scratch and learn how to edit sound or graphics or platforms or connecting it to RSS and SEO on my website, like it's as you know, it's 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 a different kettle of fish. But
Yeah.
it's mad, the connections. I contribute to a couple of radio stations. I do motivational pieces, and I did a piece for a radio station the other day on the Lakota Indians, and they're a sub tribe of the Sioux. And probably the most famous Sioux guy I said in the podcast, in this radio broadcast, was Sitting Bull, who killed Custard at the Battle of Little Bighorn. And the Lakota have this amazing ethic for how we should live our life, how we should treat people. Like it's like you got 5 or 6 of the world's greatest religions and ideas and just stripped it right back to bare essentials. So I talked about how we could improve our life if we lived a little bit more like Sitting Bull. And I got an email yesterday morning from someone who was listening to tell me that she was a cousin of the last person killed at the Battle of Little Bighorn, Custard's last stand. And she
Wow.
was an Irish woman, and this guy was an Irish guy, and that he was wearing the papal cross because he had worked in the Vatican as a bodyguard for the Pope. And when Sitting Bull died, the last thing he had in his hand was the papal cross of this Irish guy, and whose cousin had heard me on the radio. And I just
That's
love,
mad.
isn't
Yeah.
it? Isn't it just crazy? I love that we talk in technology and in business about the importance of connections and World Wide Web, but I think for people too, I when I'm talking to in business environment and I'm coaching people, I really stress the social. At the end of the day, people buy products from people. People deal with people. People are satisfied with people, or you're disappointed by people. And you know, the companies that are really moving ahead and are really being successful despite COVID are the ones that are people centered in their products and in their services.
Yeah. I've got a few more questions for you. Three more. Have you got any books, podcasts, mentors that you go to read, listen, or get advice from?
That's a really powerful question. So I suppose Jerry Duffy, who a lot of people I'm sure will have heard of, ran 32 marathons in 32 counties in 32 days. I initially contacted Jerry a few years ago to go on one of his courses, one of his mentoring courses and training courses about, working as a speaker. And Jerry, to his credit, said, "Look, meet me for lunch." He said, "You're too far down the road for me to mentor." He said, "You've made a lot of progress. You have a lot of things in place." And I would have been, very grateful for him for giving me the encouragement and giving me I suppose, the push to go and do it. But as a rule of thumb, Rian, I read a lot and I learn a lot, but I really, really concentrate bizarrely on doing things differently. So doing things differently is working for me. So I did an agency interview the other day for a UK speaker agency, and they said to me, same question, said, which speakers are you influenced by and who do you follow? And I said the truth. I said, nobody. And they said, "Oh, but you must." And I said, "No." I said, "Because when I go to a conference, I see people, they walk in, they all have the same laptop, they're wearing the same suit, they're wearing the same shirts, they're wearing the same shoes, they have the same opening, the same closing, there's the same rhythm to their speech." And I said, what people have to embrace is difference and confidence in yourself. So I mightn't be the world's greatest speaker, but I am definitely the best Enda O'Doherty out there. There's no one can touch me. So I concentrate on maybe doing that, much like the podcast too. I made a list of what the podcasts that I listen to, the most successful podcasts in Ireland. I made a list of their top 10 attributes, and could be crazy, but I've done the opposite for all of them. So I looked at what everyone was doing, and I'm going totally the other direction. And I'm sure I can, phase back in and phase out, but initially I'm doing things completely differently. And I urge people that if you look at innovators or people who are successful in sporting or in the business field, they're not people who follow the herd. They're people who stand up and say, you know what,
Yeah,
I have a plan, I have an idea, and by God, I'm going to stick to it.
I agree with that. If I don't know if you live in a house, apartment, or where you live. I know you have a wife and dogs. If you have kids, all of that, they're all safe. Your loved ones are all safe, but your
Yeah.
house slash apartment is burning down, and you could only save one item. What one item would that be?
Hard drive with the family photos.
Nice answer.
100%, 100%. Because all we have, the average person watching today is going to live for 28,000 days. 28,000. Doesn't matter how much lycra you own. Doesn't matter how many bikes you own. Doesn't matter how many times you run up Kilimanjaro. Doesn't matter if
Yeah.
you go to yoga 6 times a day. An average Irish person is getting 28,000 days. So my point to people is this: you got to squeeze the max you can out of it. There was a client rang me the other night. They were asking me, what would I do? And I was explaining to them, as a speaker, there's a conference call, but I said to them, I would always do a PDF afterwards with interactive videos and knowledge to keep the speech alive. And I said, there's a second presentation that I send you 4 weeks after our first presentation on video. So again, it keeps my presentation, my words and ideas alive. And the client was saying, oh, that's really good. And she said, is there anything you won't do? And I said, average. And she went,
Nice.
oh, she said, that's a bit of a killer. And I said, yeah. I said, what's the point? Like what's the point in sitting on the couch eating Domino's pizza, watching Netflix and think that you're living? You're not. Your hamster in the cage behind you is marginally ahead of you. At least he's probably running around. He's probably having more fun. But I'm passionate about. I think it's because, Rian, I wasted years of my life. Like my Friday night drink watching the old Celtic League rugby would have been, a pint glass of vodka with a bottle of Benelin. And if an average person drank that, it would kill you stone dead. But my addiction had got to that point. My Saturday, breakfast in around 2:30, 3:00 because I was hungover, dying.
Well,
Saturday night start again, and Monday, fall apart and try and keep together until Thursday night so I could legitimately pretend to go out again. Opening of an envelope, I'd be at it, because there was an opportunity socially to have alcohol. But like, I think because I wasted those days,
yeah.
I'm desperate to squeeze the life out of them. I'm grateful for the life I have, but I definitely, the hard drive. If you ask me a physical object, definitely the hard drive.
Good answer. Yeah, no, good. It was a good answer. A lot of people, and I've repeated this, you usually say laptop or their mobile phone, but I enjoy when guests give me a different answer.
I would tell you my Leinster jersey or my Leinster flag as well now, if I'm being really honest.
Actually, now that you mentioned Leinster, I had a guest on from Cork, I can't remember, 2, 3 weeks ago, Andrew Whitaker, and he's a huge Munster fan. And
Yeah.
I put the question to him saying, O'Gara or Sexton? So, same question to you, O'Gara or Sexton?
As a mentor, as a coach, as a kicker, as a leader,
Player,
as a person,
as a player.
as
As
a player,
in, yeah.
as a warrior on the pitch, Johnny, every single time. Total belief, total commitment, desperate to win, passion beyond belief, 100% every single time. I was very lucky. I said to, this year I got to work very briefly with the Leinster Academy. And, one of the things that struck me about Leinster, and it's wonderful to pass the lessons on to business companies when I'm working with them, is my brief experience of working with their academy was excellence. If there's a call starting at 10:00, everyone is ready at 10 to 10, down to greetings, down to thank yous, down to emails, punctuation. You get a stamp from them, a letter, the stamp is in the top right corner. It's perfection. The standard is driven in every single aspect, in friendliness and communication skills. Like it was, I did a presentation for their academy on maximizing your potential in life. And the next morning I got an email from one of the organizers with the head of excellence in the academy, just thanking me for my presentation. And in it, there was an attachment. There was a PowerPoint attachment. I said, I wonder what this is. And I opened it up. So when I opened up the presentation, it was the players after I had spoken, sat down, and they made a list of possible benefits for them as a team, as an organization, if they follow what I said. Then they
Wow.
had a list of positive negatives if they didn't follow what I had said, the advice I'd given. They had an evaluation of me. And then they had consequences for people within their group who did not match up to the expectation, right? It was
Yeah.
presented in it was so beautifully put together. You could easily use it in a commercial setting. But I've spoken to teams where, right lads, cup of coffee and they go home. But the Leinster way was learn, advance, change, get better, progress, and then even to send that back to me the next day with a thank you. And I
Amazing.
literally sat looking at this and I went, wow, this is why they're so good. And
Yeah.
I think too, as an organization too, like again, my experience is very limited in working with them, but um, I didn't come across a single individual who wasn't outstanding. In no matter what their role was, everybody was on point, pushing the limits constantly, and that's why they win.
Sure. Great team. I'd like you to imagine it's the end of the decade, so it's 2030, and you're looking back on the last decade, so the last 9 to 10 years. You can answer this personally or professionally, but what would you like to be looking back on, pretending it's 2030?
I'd like to be looking back, thinking that I made a difference. I'd like to be looking back at the crisis. So there's a friend of mine. He is amazing guy. He was in the Irish Rangers. He was a sniper in the Gardaí, and he's head of an elite armed response unit. He rang me at the start, in the middle of lockdown. He said to me, Enda, how are you doing? And I said, well, I said, the first 2 days I thought, right, which car are we getting rid of? Because I'm out of business. I'm gone. This is over. No theaters, no conferences. It's game over. I am gone. And he said, what did you do? I said, well, the first thing I did was to save my family. I signed up to a digital media marketing program online, and one of these free ones. And I followed that, did 2 or 3 lectures every week and learned more than I could have imagined. I said, I got my book published. It's on sale. I said, I spent every single day on LinkedIn. I started planning the podcast. I rewrote every presentation I had and wrote new ones. I said, I pushed myself as hard physically as I could every single day. He said, that's brilliant. I said, why? He said, when we have a hostage situation or we have a shootout or, something like that, he says, we sit down as a group afterwards in evaluation. And he said, we really only have one question. And I was like, no, come on. You have more than one question. He said, no, it boils down to one question. The one question we ask ourselves is, did we survive or did we thrive in crisis? He said, because if you just survive, if you fall over the finish line, the likelihood is the next time a crisis comes, there's a serious chance you won't make the finish line. And he said, in
Yeah.
my world, somebody gets very badly hurt. He said, crisis, you're meant to grow, you're meant to change. It's not meant to be pleasant. It's not saying I enjoy it. He said, but it's about adversity and about our response to it. Like we can't control the world. It's a certainty that there'll be adversity and challenges in our life, but we can control our response. And long answer, when I look back, what would I look back in 10 years time? I'd love to look back and say I thrived. I'd love to look back and say I was happy. I'd love to look back and say that I impacted people, that I made a difference to people's lives. In the last year, I suppose, I mean, it's happened to me multiple times. I spoke with a company a couple of months ago, and huge staff, very successful company, and everything was flying for them, and I explained to the HR department that, if people reach out to me afterwards, of course, I'll always get back in touch or, offer advice or offer help. And I said to her, I guarantee you within your environment, there are people struggling that you've no clue of. Finished the presentation. Within 5 minutes, the first person to reach out to me was the CEO of the company.
Wow.
Who was absolutely falling apart. And if you saw him on the day, Rian, suited, booted, powerful, charismatic, leader, tick every box.
Yeah.
But there was one box that he wasn't ticking. He wasn't happy. So I would look back to say, was I resilient? Did I thrive? Was I happy? Did I impact people? And it's a bit corny in 2021, but did I love? Did I care for people?
Mm.
Because I know, if anyone who's sat at the deathbed of someone they love, or you know, it's the old cliche. You don't look for your bank balance. You don't look for your accountant. You know, you look for the people that you care about. And
Yeah.
that's what I'd love to look back and say.
Well, good news is it's only the start for you, and you've already achieved a lot. So I'm sure in a decade you'll have achieved a lot more. I've thoroughly enjoyed spending the last 50, 55 minutes getting to know you a little more. And I wish you nothing but the success going forward. Enda O'Doherty, thank you for being my guest today.
Rian, thank you so much. And look, can I do the shameless plug? If anyone would like to find
Sure.
more information about having me speak with your company or business, you can find me on endaodoherty.ie, and also you can get a signed copy of my book, which is there as well. And the one thing I'd say to people is keep smiling, keep working hard, and enjoy life.
I'll leave a link to your YouTube, your book, your website, all of that, LinkedIn, everything below in the comments field, depending on if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on any of your podcast apps. The link is in the comment field below.
Rian, thank you so much.